There's the date on which A.W. Snelling sent that cable to his government, that they should speed up with the process of getting rid of Nkrumah, because he was making the African too politically conscious. That was the reason for the overthrow of Nkrumah. Of course, now we also have access to the declassified documents of the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States of America. And it's clear that none of those reasons was true. I'm sure you've seen something, the British intelligence discussing J.W.K. Halley and his capabilities. I'm sure you've seen it. It's been published all over the place, you know. They didn't even believe that the people had any capability, the people who had overthrown Nkrumah. I had the privilege of interviewing A.K. Deku.
The IGP.
Yeah. A few weeks before he died at his hometown, you know, and that interview is available. And I asked him a very specific question. I said, what do you think of Nkrumah? And he said, Nkrumah is one of the best leaders that Africa has had. This is one of the persons who took part in planning the coup. And he tells me, and the interview is available, it's on YouTube, that Nkrumah is one of the best leaders that Africa has had.
Did he know that when he was planning the coup?
I asked him, so why did you overthrow him?
Yes.
And his answer is that if he hadn't joined the conspiracy, he would have been killed. The revelations that I found most interesting was that the person at the center of the conspiracy to overthrow Nkrumah, at the center of the CIA and Western intelligence plot, was not KOTOKA. It was not Afrifa. It was not Halley himself. It was a guy called Major Kwesi. Major Kwesi, who worked at the 37 military hospital. So all of the meetings of the conspirators were held in Major Kwesi's house. Until then, I didn't even know. I had never heard of the name Major Kwesi, because he just evaporated, you know. I don't know why, but the center of that conspiracy was a Major Kwesi, who then worked at the 37 military hospital.
Marks the 60th anniversary of the overthrow of the great Pan-African and socialist leader, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. How does that make you feel, 60 years after his demise from political power?
Well, I was a young boy when the coup occurred, and I saw the coup live.
You did?
Yes.
Where were you? Which part of Ghana were you in?
We were staying in Kutubabi, what is today referred to as Kutubabi Down. Okay. And my father was a trade union leader.
Is he the senior to you? Kwesi Pratt senior?
Well, he's just Kwesi Pratt.
And then you are the junior?
Yes.
Okay.
So he was a trade union leader. And in those days, the trade union leaders used to fly the trade union flag, which was very powerful. I mean, if you saw the trade union flag, you knew who they were.
What were the colors?
Yes.
What were the colors of the flag, trade union flag?
Oh, I think there was yellow in it, there was green in it, and there was a bit of red in it, and white, you know, but it was, you know, the trade union flag. So I remember at dawn, you know, being woken up because the coup was being announced by, I think, KOTOKA then, you know, the coup was announced. I heard the first statement made by General Nkrumah, and so on. And then somehow, out of recklessness or anxiety or whatever, my father decided to drive out of the house. So he went into his Simca. You know Simca?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Went into his Simca, drove out of the house, and in a few minutes came back with bullet holes in the car. Because the flag was still flying.
Of course.
Okay. I don't know where he wanted to go, why he went out of the house, but he came back with bullet holes in the car.
Wow.
Those of us, young people around that time, then gathered ourselves and decided to go around, you know, seeing what was happening. One of the first places we went was the house of Abavana. Abavana used to be a minister in the Nkrumah government. You know, if you're coming from Pikval,
yes,
He has a house there.
And that's why the place is called Abavana Junction.
Abavana Junction and Abavana Down. We were at Abavana Down, you know. So we went up there and we saw the arrest of people in the house. I saw it with my own eyes. Saw them beaten. I saw the blood oozing out of their nose and so on, you know. Horrible scenes. From there, we then walked all the way to the Kanda estates, you know, where the military were carrying out some operations.
Right behind Flagstaff House.
Behind Flagstaff House, you know, the story buildings, you know. And I saw them pound the nozzle of their armored vehicles and fire, and I saw furniture tumbling to the ground and so on, you know. Horrific scenes. Then we came back to what is today the Accra Newtown station. And there's a story building just right by the post office, and where some of the security personnel were living. And I saw how they were arrested, how they were molested and beaten and so on. I saw all of that. I saw the panic which had been created in society and how Nkrumah supporters and CPP members and so on were burying their paraphernalia. Is that how we say it?
Yes, paraphernalia.
You were burying them.
Their ID cards and
your scarves and so on were being buried and so on. Out of fear.
Hide the evidence.
Yes.
That you are an Nkrumahist.
Because they will come for you. They will beat you up. They killed a few. You know, they killed quite a lot of people. They arrested people and put them in detention without trial and committed all manner of atrocities and so on. I remember that very, very clearly, you know. One of the things that left a lasting impression on me was the arrest of a guy called Boy Moses. Boy Moses was a confidant of Nkrumah. He had been arrested, and the junta decided to make an example of him. So they built an iron cage, put him in the cage like a monkey, and tied his cage to a moving vehicle and drove him across the streets of Accra.
What was the reaction of the people watching this?
You had to cheer. How dare you? They had to cheer. I mean, this was one of the most repressive moments in our history. Can you imagine a government arresting a human being, putting him in an iron cage, tying him to a moving vehicle and driving him across the streets of Accra? Horrendous, but it happened. You know, there are the stories of pregnant women who were arrested and dumped into prison without charge or trial, who delivered in prison. There are many. I'm sure you know some of the stories yourself, you know. So this was the period. But for me, one of the most significant things later, growing up and learning the facts and so on, is the reason for the coup d'etat. We are told that Nkrumah was overthrown because he was a dictator, because he had established a one-party state and so on. Forget that. The reason is provided for in a cable which was sent by the British High Commissioner in Accra in 1961 to his home government. The British High Commissioner's name is A.W. Snelling. A.W. Snelling sent a cable to his home government urging them to speed up the process of toppling Nkrumah. He said they had to get rid of Nkrumah because he was making the African too politically conscious.
This is back in 61.
1961, September 21st, 1961.
His birthday.
There's the date on which A.W. Snelling sent that cable to his government, that they should speed up with the process of getting rid of Nkrumah. Because he was making the African too politically conscious. That was the reason for the overthrow of Nkrumah. Of course, now we also have access to the declassified documents of the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States of America. And it's clear that none of those reasons was true. I'm sure you've seen something, the British intelligence discussing J.W.K. Halley and his capabilities. I'm sure you've seen it. It's been published all over the place, you know. They didn't even believe that the people had any capability, the people who had overthrown Nkrumah. I had the privilege of interviewing A.K. Deku.
The IGP.
Yeah. A few weeks before he died at his hometown, and that interview is available. And I asked him a very specific question. I said, what do you think of Nkrumah? And he said, Nkrumah is one of the best leaders that Africa has had. This is one of the persons who took part in planning the coup. And he tells me, and the interview is available, it's on YouTube, that Nkrumah is one of the best leaders that Africa has had.
Did he know that when he was planning the coup?
I asked him, so why did you overthrow him?
Yes.
And his answer is that if he hadn't joined the conspiracy, he would have been killed. That the people who were planning to overthrow Nkrumah were so vicious they had reached the point of desperation. And that when he was contacted, he had only two options, staying alive and dying. And staying alive meant that he had to go along with the conspiracy. Okay. So this is A.K. Deku. This is not me. This is A.K. Deku. You understand? And I'm happy that it was recorded.
Yes,
this
indeed.
interview was recorded and it's available. I recorded it actually for TV3. You understand? That's not all. I mean, a lot more was revealed in that interview. And one of the revelations that I found most interesting was that the person at the center of the conspiracy to overthrow Nkrumah, at the center of the CIA and Western intelligence plot, was not KOTOKA. It was not Afrifa. It was not Hali himself. It was a guy called Major Kwesi. Major Kwesi, who worked at the 37 military hospital. So all of the meetings of the conspirators were held in Major Kwesi's house. Until then, I didn't even know. I had never heard of the name Major Kwesi because he just evaporated. I don't know why, but the center of that conspiracy was a Major Kwesi who then worked at the 37 military hospital.
And after the coup, what happened to him?
I don't know. He just vanished.
Like a dwarf?
I've been trying to find out what happened to that Major Kwesi.
Paint us a picture of life before the 66 coup. You were born in the early 50s. What was life like in Ghana?
Well, I can only tell you from the perspective of a child. I mean, I must have been around 12, 13 years when the coup happened.
Yes.
So I couldn't be telling you about, the economic statistics at the time and so on.
But just your personal life as a little boy. What was growing up in the 50s like?
I was a member of the Young Pioneer Movement.
What was that like?
And it was, how would I describe it? It was everything a child would hope for. In the Young Pioneer Movement, we had cultural groups. So those who were inclined were assisted, to drum, to sing, and so on. There were drama groups, those who were engaged in the production of plays, and so on. There were study groups, people who studied our history, and so on. There were even boxing clubs.
In the Young Pioneers?
In the Young Pioneer Movement, we were taught to box and so on. It was clear that this movement's main purpose was to groom and produce leaders for the future. In all fields, football, boxing, athletics, table tennis, all of that.
Which of the groups were you part of?
I did boxing.
Nice.
Yeah, I did boxing. I started boxing very, very early, in the Young Pioneer Movement. Actually, I never graduated to the Young Pioneer Movement. There was the African Personality Cult, which was the first stage for younger people.
Okay.
And then you joined the Young Pioneer Movement at a little more advanced age.
So primary school level, you'd be part of African
so I was in the African Personality Cult, and I did some boxing, and so on, and did many other things.
Okay. How was this organized? At the school level or in the community, the Young Pioneers?
In my school, there was no Young Pioneer branch in my school.
Where was your school?
Barnes Memorial Institute. There was no Young Pioneer, but we would close from school and joined others at the New Times Experimental, where there was an active young pioneer group, you know. So we moved from school to school, you know, to the centers where the young pioneer activity was going on, and we became part of the young pioneer movement. Now, many of the things that I've hung on to in my life, in terms of ideas and aspiration and so on, I would say with certainty came from the young pioneer movement. I mean, a strong sense of Pan-Africanism was inculcated into us. We were made to believe that it was almost wrong to feel more Ghanaian than African.
You should be African first.
African first. You know, even at that age, we felt more African than Ghanaian, and so on. I thought that was a good thing. I've not regretted, you know, going through that kind of training, you know. And then somehow we were made to believe very, very strongly that the people who are defeated are the people who give up. You know, and if you look at our history, throughout our history, from the 1940s to now, we never give up. We've never given up. In spite of the 1966 coup, in spite of the fact that a law was enacted which made it a criminal offense to print, hold, or distribute Nkrumah's photograph, we never gave up.
Just a photo?
Yeah. It was a criminal offense to print, hold, or distribute Nkrumah's photograph. You go to prison for that. But we never gave up. I recall that it was around 1969, I hope I'm right, that Johnny F.S. Hansen and Dr. Lutrot actually defied the law and printed thousands of copies of Nkrumah photographs and distributed it openly and dared the authorities to arrest them.
Did they?
They didn't arrest them, but they dared the authorities to arrest them, you know. So that spirit of defiance has lived with us up to today, you know, and that spirit of defiance and resistance is perhaps ultimately what will lead to the building of that new Ghana and perhaps that new Africa.
How did the 66 coup affect your father?
Well, he stayed in the labor movement, okay, but the labor movement had a lot of problems. First, there was the attempt to ban the TUC, okay, to ban the TUC, which didn't succeed. There were many attempts. The TUC strength derived from the Industrial Relations Act of 1965, which was seriously amended, okay, and which now recognizes that anybody can set up any union. You know, for example, in the GBC, there was one union, the Public Services Workers Union. Today, it is possible for workers in the GBC to belong to different unions as a result of the new architecture. Now that means weakening the trade unions, you know.
Instead of one group, then you have splinters.
Splinters and so on. Beyond that, the Industrial Relations Act of 1965 was so seriously amended that labor leaders felt that, you know, they were going for them and so on. So at some point, I've forgotten the year and the date, but at some point, the labor leaders then decided to organize what they then called Operation Zero Hour.
What did that mean?
Operation Zero Hour, it was the declaration of a nationwide strike and agitation in order to bring down the new regime. And this led to a number of arrests of labor leaders and so on. I can't remember the most of the details then. I was too young, you know. But I remember clearly that the labor leaders wanted to organize what was then known as Operation Zero Hour, and that it led to arrest and so on. And the labor movement was decimated. One of the things that I remember after today is the fact that, you know, that the celebration of May Day was banned.
After the coup?
After the coup.
No way.
May Day was banned as a communist activity. Okay. Now, what is interesting is that the TUC had this gentleman, he was called Hineku, Ofe Hineku, who had been at the center of the planning for May Day and so on. The government set up a committee to investigate May Day celebrations. And the committee, for real, the committee came up with the idea that the celebration of May Day was a communist activity and that the state should not have supported it. So Mr. Hineku was asked to refund the expenditure which had been incurred for all the period that he has supervised the planning of May Day celebrations. Sounds incredible.
It's ludicrous.
Yeah, but it's true. Yeah.
What was the philosophy of the state at that time? They were obviously anti-communist. So what did they say they were?
Well, they proclaimed capitalism in different forms and using different lexicon and so on. You know, but clearly their path was the path of extreme, capitalism. And I will illustrate. You see, after the coup, in fact, before the coup, Nkrumah had established these guerrilla camps across the country where national liberation fighters from Angola, from Mozambique, and so on were being trained to take up arms against the colonial authorities in those countries and so on. After the coup, these camps were discontinued, And some of the leaders of these camps were actually arrested and sent back to the colonial authorities in their countries. I'm told that some of them were killed. And so on.
Yeah.
Okay, that happened. In fact, the coup leaders and those who inherited them described these camps as subversive camps. Subversive camps. Okay, so this happened. But the most interesting development, I think, happened after 1969, the 1969 elections, when the Progress Party came to power. That was the height of the struggle against apartheid. And there was a clamor around the world to impose full-blown sanctions on the apartheid regime. In fact, the OAU had decided that we should impose full sanctions on the apartheid regime. Can you believe that the government of Ghana decided not to follow the world in imposing sanctions on apartheid?
Who were they following?
Obviously the US, So the government of Ghana then decided that they wanted to do business with apartheid and said that apartheid could only be overthrown if we collaborated with apartheid and did business with apartheid and so on. Of course, to be fair, I remember that Mr. Victor Wusu, who was then the foreign minister in the Busia administration, opposed Busia. Actually publicly opposed Busia.
Did he still keep his job after that opposition?
I think he did, I think he did, But then his government supported dialogue with apartheid, which was considered an atrocious crime in the world. At the height of apartheid,
Indeed.
They wanted to do business with apartheid. But this is part of the reality. This is one of the consequences we suffered as a result of the 1966 coup.
Are we on our way to recovery from that coup?
I'm not sure. I mean, a lot more people are getting enlightened. A lot more people are beginning to become advocates for united Africa. But we are not there yet. Look, by the February 24, 1966 coup, the nucleus of the United States of Africa had already emerged. Ghana, Mali, and Guinea were one country. Ghana, Mali, and Guinea had formed a confederation. And that is why it was so easy for Nkrumah to move as president of Ghana, go to Guinea and become president of Guinea, co-president of Guinea, and so on. The union, the base of the union had been established. Recently found documents, I haven't read them myself, but I'm told by those who have read those documents, that by February 24, 1966, the Congo had also agreed to join this confederation. So at least you had 4 states in Africa agreeing to join a confederation of African states, a nucleus. Where are we today? We are so far away from that dream. In fact, the closest to that dream is the alliance of Sahel states, which is not ideologically and politically motivated. It's an alliance for the survival of those states. Just pure survival mechanism, which is different from what Nkrumah, Modibo Keita, Sékou Touré, and Patrice Lumumba wanted to do.
So how do you feel about the African Union in 2026?
You know, some of these views, sometimes we like to keep them to ourselves, because we don't want to unruffle feathers and so on. But let me sum it up. When I saw the statement issued by the African Union on the Israel-American aggression against Iran, I was shocked and embarrassed. African Union jumping right in the middle, not taking sides, and making statements to the effect that, oh, we have to go back to diplomacy and so on. Absolute rubbish. You understand? This African Union is very weak. And it is weak because Africa today has weak leaders. Africa today has leaders who cannot dream big, who are afraid of the empire. Look at the African leaders we have today. It's sad, you know.
Is there any hope?